With all the lineup changes and everything that's gone on with the band, what was the secret to keeping the Megadeth spirit alive?
Firing people.
What, no warning, no second chance?
Megadeth are the band that made me fall in love with heavy metal and music as a whole. Now, you might have a lot of hang-ups about the pretty much dictatorship of this band led by Dave Mustaine. You might hate his vocals. You might think he's insufferable and impossible to get along with. But what cannot be denied is that Dave Mustaine is the single greatest and most talented songwriter in the world of heavy metal. His true songwriting prowess was in his best work in Megadeth.
We didn't care about the future. We just wanted to be the most dangerous band on the planet.
Then it was in our contract to, to basically break all the laws of God and man, I guess, So that's what we did. The first thing I thought of was low budget, but the title made up for everything.
There's been many different reasons cited for why Metallica with Dave Mustaine fell apart, but ultimately, they just never were meant to be together. I mean, they're a bunch of people that have giant egos.
Four of us, I don't know that we could have survived. There was destined to be some kind of an explosion at some point.
But Dave was always destined to have his own project. He never needed Metallica. He quickly shacked up with David Ellefson to play bass, would be known as Junior for short, because you can't have two Daves in the same band. And they had a short stint with Kerry King of Slayer, of all people, playing guitar. But this quickly upset the other members of Slayer, so he ran right back to them. They hired the extremely talented jazz drummer Gar Samuelson, who to me is probably the most, if not the most talented drummer to ever be in this band.
The guy comes, and he falls asleep with a cigarette in his hand, and it burns right clear through his fingers, and I thought, this is rad.
And of course, bringing in his very close friend to be the second lead guitar player, Chris Poland. And everything came together during one of the rehearsals with Gar, where no matter how many different singers they tried out, Gar, as a joke, suggested, Dave, why don't you try it? And for all the flack that Dave gets as a singer, especially in the early days, he has always had that talent. Now, you could think it's annoying how nasally his voice is, but just listen, even the first album, to a song like Looking Down the Cross. An amazing vocal performance from him.
And this was all you got. Stop these fucking wings. The sex time right now. Oh, bells and 80s ring. This is a nightmare. But you wanna know the name. Smell a priest.
So they got signed to Combat Records, and then in 1985, no matter how many speed metal bands or thrash metal bands were already started at this point, hell, even some of the famous bands had 2 albums under their belt, Megadeth blew everyone clear away. That's right, before Rain and Blood ever came out, the fastest metal album of all time was Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good.
We would get letters from all around the world. And I remember all these kids writing, man, it's gonna be fast, it's gonna be fast, it's gotta be fast. And one day we go to rehearsal and everything's bumped up about 20 beats per minute. Next thing you know, we're a speed metal band.
At this point, the band wasn't even thrash metal. They were playing so fast that it was just straight up speed metal. I mean, just look at songs like Rattlehead, and of course the opening track Last Rites Love to Death, which just tears your goddamn head off. But funny enough, this tear-ass song was actually used in a very famous Apple commercial.
My love song was Love to Death. Boy meets girl, boy falls in love with girl, girl doesn't love boy, boy kills girl. So no one else will have her.
You see, some of Dave Mustaine's material had obviously ended up on the first Metallica album, Kill 'Em All. Now, he did not write them all, and Dave Mustaine will even admit this.
You wrote the entire Kill 'Em All record!
No, I didn't write all of it. I wrote a lot of it. I wrote all the solos that Kirk's doing.
And one song that he had a lot of involvement with, The Four Horsemen, was expanded upon and slowed down in the Metallica version. Well, Dave decided to rip out those original lyrics, which were pretty much just a raunchy sex song, and bumped up the speed, making it way faster than the killer mechanics.
I remember the day Kill 'Em All came out, and I listened to it, and I heard the first song, and my stuff was on there. I was fuming because I told them not to use my music.
But where this album truly shines is not even in its fastest moments, it's in its grooviest and most rhythmic. You of course have songs like Chosen Ones with literal bass guitar breaks, a song about the killer rabbit from Monty Python, showing why this was the best lineup of Megadeth, because rhythmically, even with the lead guitar solos, everything had almost like a slight bluesy and R&B element, even when they're going full speed, especially on my favorite song here, The Skull Beneath the Skin. I mean, god damn, this song can't go a second without Gar Samuelson being all over the kit, having the absolute best swing. And this has some of Dave's best lyrics about the creation of the mascot of the band, Vic Rattlehead.
I was thinking about getting a tattoo, so I had drawn this little image of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, and had done this elaborate thing, and then I thought, you know what, you don't stick a bumper sticker on a Mercedes-Benz. We tried to use it for the first record cover. We were with a record company called Combat, and the artwork came back, and it was a plastic skull with pickles and ketchup all over it, and it looked nothing like my idea.
Even though it sounds cheap beyond belief because they spent every single cent they had on booze and drugs.
They gave us $8,000 to make the record. We spent half of that on food and dope. Chris would stop in the middle of a take to go into the bathroom to shoot up, and Gar wouldn't show up for hours because he was buying balloons of heroin.
Who cares? You could honestly start here. It is pretty much the greatest speed metal album of all time. And what 80s speed metal album doesn't sound like bargain bin trash production-wise? What's funny, though, is they actually did several remasters of this, so if you're needing that better sound, these are the few remasters that even Megadeth fans will approve of. Megadeth is known, especially in the 80s, for doing one cover song an album, which is usually the worst track. But in here they did a cover of These Boots Are Made for Walking. They changed several lyrics on here. And although this is the best cover of the 80s, Lee Hazelwood, who actually penned the song, sued the hell out of Megadeth, meaning that many prints of this album actually do not have that at all, which to me are the best versions of the album, because then it's just 7 perfect original tracks.
And I found this Reader's Digest, and it had a quote by somebody like some old dinosaur like Joan Baez or something about peace would sell, but no one would buy it. You know, and I thought, all right, cut out all of the English major stuff and make it so some blockhead like me could understand it. Peace sells, but who's buying? Huh?
What is this garbage you're watching? I want to watch the news.
Are you making headway at least?
This is the news.
I was sitting in a barbecue restaurant right here, and I looked across the street and I thought, man, a really cool album cover would be just to see the UN just blown, you know, Vic in front of it, just going like, for sale.
So despite almost everything on Peace Sells being written around the same time as the material in Killing Is My Business, this stuff actually ends up being way better because it is nothing but everything that makes Megadeth special. What Dave Mustaine did different than everyone else was add unorthodox song structures to his band, something that even death metal bands owe everything to Megadeth for. A song that seems to spiral out of control, not knowing where it's going, until you finally hit a chorus at the very end of the song. The idea of an A-B song structure was thrown in the goddamn shredder by Dave Mustaine. And no songs represent that better than the lengthy, epic Good Morning Black Friday, and of course the opening track, the song that got me hooked on this band, because I didn't know where it was going, I didn't know what I was listening to. It felt like I was speeding off the rails, out of control. We're of course talking about Wake Up Dead, a song that has so many different sections in it that's only crammed into like 3 or so minutes, barely any vocal parts. It borderline just feels like a 3-minute guitar solo. There's so many different things to even talk about musically with the song, like the fact that Dave Mustaine uses the iconic spider chord that he invented for this song that also was used in Metallica's Ride the Lightning.
That song was written when I was living with a girl primarily to have a roof over my head. Didn't really care too much about her, but having sex was the only way to pay my rent. And I was seeing the girl I really liked downstairs in the garage.
Well, you're a naughty boy.
Thank you.
But the moment that truly hooked me that this band really means business is when everything seems to go quiet, the band comes punching right back in. And honestly, the solo in that section is probably my favorite Dave Mustaine solo. Of course, even since the first album, you could hear how damn good Gar is. But Chris Poland truly shines on Peace Sells, because with that awful production, it's really hard to hear that this man has the most godly guitar tone next to George Lynch or something. This guy's lead tone is butter smooth, and especially with those jazz note selections. Look, I love MArty Friedman and just about every guitar player in this band, even Dave himself, but Chris Poland smokes every one. The way he just does the phrasing on them is unheard of. It's like he's playing a violin.
This guy is amazing because he's a jazz player. And he had stuck his hand through a window and did something really weird with his finger where he has to bar it so it goes stiff, and then the end of it kind of goes like that.
Although the first half of this album seems to be a little stacked up more than the second half, the way it ends is fantastic. A song about Russian roulette, having your last moments together in the song My Last Words. It is really the perfect Dave Mustaine guitar solo. Most people point to this song as his best of all time. I mean, hell, he's competing with Chris Poland, so of course, for a song like this, he's got to whip something out. And what makes Megadeth so great is that the solos are just as good and as important as the guitar riffs, and both of them are equally fantastic. Of course, this is the beginning of Dave Mustaine getting very political, especially on the song and album cover of Peace Sells. David Mustaine at heart is a punk rocker, and he has very rebellious lyrics all the time, even at his own detriment, even at his old age. But what else makes this song awesome is it was actually very frequently used as the intro for MTV.
MTV News. You hear it.
Now, this is also Megadeth's darkest album. Many call this Megadeth's Slayer album because you have songs like Good Morning Black Friday about a serial killer, and of course the song Bad Omens about summoning the devil, and The Conjuring about summoning a demon. A very controversial song because Dave Mustaine for the longest time refused to play it when he became a born-again Christian.
The Conjuring is the song that has the hex in it. I had to jumble the words in it so people don't know how to do the hex, and I left some stuff out, but I put that hex on 2 people. One was for physical damage, and the other one was for sex with somebody that was way out of my batting league at the time. Next night, she was in my bed. The other guy, his leg was just completely destroyed in a car crash. Now, that can't be pinned to me because it's just speculation.
I heard that you had to consecrate your marriage to the underworld by having sex with a satanic priest. And I said, I don't care, no matter how bad I want to be evil, no one's mounting this kid.
And it's songs like The Conjuring that showed that they matured now from being just that speed metal band going as fast as they could to having the chunkiest, heaviest riffs and being the definitive thrash metal band. They made this album while poor and starving and desperate, and it paid off because they finally got signed to a big label like Capitol Records, and they blew up as the new premier thrash band, along with the other big 4. But it's important to note that around this time, the band was starting to kind of spiral out with drug problems, most notably heroin.
Oh, gosh, we're going to Alice's bus, man. We gotta, keep it down.
Basically, on a level of just telling him, look, I've done it all. I've seen it all. It doesn't work. You cannot, especially a show with your intensity. You're gonna burn right out.
The last thing he said was you guys be careful out here. And we were just like, what's he talking about?
We've been saying that we've sold out, so to speak, for commercial success, and just for that reason is the reason we titled the record what it is.
Which is?
So far, so good, so what?
It is a miracle that it's not a disaster. Jr. had to go to rehab. Dave Mustaine tried many times unsuccessfully to go to rehab. Dave Mustaine and Chris Poland ended up getting into gladiatorial battles in their hotel room.
Me and Dave got in the biggest fight ever. Broke the toilet off the floor in the bathroom and then went out into the other room and smashed the headboard through the wall.
In fact, Dave was so messed up, he full speed rammed into a parked police car, getting arrested and once again trying to go into rehab, which to me seems very ironic with the song on here called 502.
I had 7 different things on me and about 9 different chemicals in me. I had no more intention of stopping them than I had to pull my own eyelids off.
But the classic 80s Megadeth lineup was falling apart at the seams.
Almost every week I would go to rehearsal and some of Gar's cymbals were gone because he'd hawk it for dope, or some of my guitars were gone because Chris Poland would hawk my guitars for dope.
And these issues with Dave and Chris Poland would end up actually inspiring one of the songs in here called Liar, which is just nothing but Dave essentially Discord griefing.
Mustaine, like for years, would go on stage and call me a liar. And I realized that's why things were so hard for me to try and get deals or even get, like I walked into Carbon one day and I thought, you know what, these guitars aren't bad. I want to talk to their A&R guy. I spoke to the guy and he goes, dude, we don't use people like you on our roster.
And even the production level, Dave was fighting with everyone. They were cycling through so many producers and engineers. At one point, they had this guy, Paul Lanny, that actually made the album sound amazing if you ever listen to his mixes. And Dave ended up firing him because he woke up one morning watching him feed an apple to a deer in his underwear or something, which is a weird reason to fire a guy. I guess a weird thing to catch him doing as well.
We had it mixed twice by 2 different guys, and the first guy mixed it like twice, so it got mixed 3 times. And the third time we had a guy named Michael Wagner mix it, and when I would leave the studio, Jeff Young would go in there and you know, do another recall and just totally just gas the thing up with reverb.
Which brings us into the new lineup. One of the least good Megadeth lineups, of course, you had Chuck Behler, who's just a serviceable punk-style drummer. And then Jeff Young, he's no Chris Poland or MArty Friedman, but he came from the school of Randy Rhoads playing neoclassical style runs. And what made him awesome is that, just like Chris Poland, he had an awesome guitar tone that had a very dark, haunting quality to it, which can be heard best in one of the most underrated songs in here, a song that is not about smoking weed. It's about a witch that was buried alive by her father, Mary Jane. Now would be a very good time to note that Dave had tons of songs written throughout the years, and he's very well known for randomly dropping a song on an album that could have been written 10 years prior. And the song Set the World Afire is the perfect example.
Set the World Afire was the song that was actually titled Megadeth that I wrote about Alan Cranston when I first left Metallica and got in the bus. It was kind of a post-apocalyptic song about what happens after the bomb was dropped.
And speaking of anger, this might be Dave Mustaine's most pissed off album, beginning to end, just constant venom from his vocals, and even in the intro guitar solo, Into the Lungs of Hell. And nothing is more angry than the best song on here, the ending track, Pissed Off, middle finger to the PMRC, Parents Music Resource Center, that was trying to censor every metal band in the 80s. We're of course talking about the nasty hook and mouth.
The PMRC tried coming down on me on So Far So Good So What. Okay, Tipper Gore dropped acid in the 60s, and Albert Gore got caught smoking pot, but he used the Bill Clinton line that I didn't inhale it. That's just like, okay, you put a dick in your mouth, but you don't suck. Okay.
The only moment of brevity on here is the lengthy melodic song that was a tribute to Cliff Burton and Metallica that had just died at the time. A song that's not about him, though. It's, of course, another song about Dave complaining about his girlfriend, Diana. Or, of course, talk about In My Darkest Hour, a very powerful song with amazing guitar solos and very good singing from Dave.
As soon as I heard, I just picked up my guitar and I started crying, and I just wrote the song, the music, in one fell swoop from beginning to end.
the song was actually used as the theme song, and Dave Mustaine was actually the cover of the film poster for The Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, the Metal Years documentary.
There were people in the movie, you know, these ugly pig women that were saying that they had sex more than twice a day, and they were so hideous. The only place I could possibly think of them getting, you know, laid more than once would probably be a kennel or a prison.
As much as people, including Penelope Spheres, attacks these hair bands as being completely out of control, for some reason, they wrongly depict Megadeth as being the clean living, clean loving band of the future.
In shape, and you need to keep your health in shape.
I'm not going to cheat the audience that way. I don't get high when I'm practicing at home alone, so why should I do it when I go up on stage?
There were worse than any of these hair bands at the time. Even though it has weird sound, even though the band was completely out of control, and even though nobody seems to like that cover of Anarchy in the UK, a song that actually has the guitar player from the Sex Pistols on it.
I either have Johnny Rotten sing, and since Johnny hates me because I sing better than him, he figured that we'd get Steve Jones to play guitar. And he comes riding in, and he goes, I want $100 and some suction. And I'll leave it to you to figure that one out. And I went, suction? I ain't gonna do that.
Despite all that, this album absolutely rules, but something had to give with Dave Mustaine's problems, and for a good little bit here, he'd finally be clean and focused.
Megadeth's time had come, and that was really the time for us to go out and conquer and claim what we've been wanting to get for a long time.
I saw this bumper sticker that said "Rust in Peace" on it, and I just went like, light bulb science. Under the moniker of being a peaceful world, all these weapons would be useless and they would therefore rust, but that's such a joke. That'll never happen.
Once again, many of the most important songs on Rust in Peace were written prior to this album. In fact, the title track goes way back as one of the very first songs Dave Mustaine ever wrote, and had hit it for the longest time because a band that he had showed this to had stole it from him.
That song was called Child Saint. I was at a party one night and I wanted to get free liquor from these guys, so I said, oh, I'll show you a little part. They learned the whole damn song. I was so freaked out because I'm driving down the freeway with Junior and we're listening to KNAC, and the guy goes, and that was Child Saint by Child Saint. And I was like,
many theorize that because Mustaine didn't have the greatest lineup during So Far, So Good, So What, that he held some of the more technical, off-the-wall songs. He needed goated musicians to pull off songs like Holy War's The Punishment Due. Chuck Behler was just not the man for the job, and you can actually hear in the original demo that they did during the So Far, So Good, So What era that he just could not cut it and had no intensity with the song.
The drummer I really liked a lot, but you know, he wouldn't listen to any direction and take advice, and now he's got a kid and no gig, so you figured that out.
Enter drum roadie, drum god, the man that inspired me to play drums, Nick Menza, who was actually playing with Slayer at the time, that was able to give him these intense chops that completely transformed this album entirely.
You know, so you start at the very basics, and a lot of that lies in the drumming. You know, I think that Nick like kind of added a whole new fire to us the way we were playing.
This is a lengthy, epic two-part song from Megadeth, where the second half is, of course, about the Punisher with the slower parts, but the faster opening and closing is about religious persecution, mostly about stuff going on in the Middle East at the time, but the inspiration for the song was about an incident that Dave Mustaine had over in Ireland.
I learned a serious lesson when we were in Ireland about my mouth and the damage that it could do for me, because someone had misled me about what the IRA and the English are all about, you know, the war that's going on between them. He said it was just the Catholics and the Protestants not getting along. And I'm thinking like to myself, that's prejudiced religion, you know, and me, Dave Mustaine, you know, big mouth galore, you know, I started thinking, well, I'm gonna like straighten all those people out. Next song's, it's for the cause. Give Ireland back to the Irish. Anarchy in Ireland. And I'm dodging pounds. If I would have known what they were worth, I would have caught them. You know, I caught one with my skull. What does war start from? Religion and women.
Well, they had to get rid of Jeff Young because he was an alleged sex pest.
This is the same guy that called up my girlfriend and said, I fantasize about having sex with you when I have sex with my girlfriend. And I went, what did he say?
He accused me of trying to have an affair with Diana.
which was untrue.
And I say, you're still fired.
And then they tried out Jeff Loomis, who was just too young at the time. And then they tried out Jeff Waters. What is it with Jeffs? Chris Oliva from Savatage tried out. According to several people in the band, they actually tried to get Slash to be on this album. And they even got Mike Klink from the amazing sounding Appetite for Destruction to produce this album.
Mike Klink had come on and said, I'm currently booked to do the Guns N' Roses record, and if they call, I have to leave. And he left. Axl called. Now, who in their right mind would have ever bet $1 that Axl would have shown up?
And then they got a phone call from a guy named Diamond Darrell asking if him and his brother could come up there and jam with him. But they, of course, already had Nick Menza in the band. So what a weird opportunity that had passed by at this moment. But through them completely running out of people to listen to demo tapes of, they decided to listen to one they initially threw out of the amazingly dynamic lead guitar player of Cacophony and the super underrated US power metal band Hawaii, MArty Friedman.
And we saw a picture of him and he had 2 different color hair, and I just looked at these guys and I just said, you gotta be kidding, and we stuck it on a shelf and we just didn't listen to it. And after we had auditioned just about every guy in the planet except for a couple of Eskimos up in Iceland, I decided to give it a whirl, and we put the CD in, and I heard the first arpeggio he went across, and I went, this guy wants to play with us?
MArty was ultimately so damn good that he really made Dave Mustaine more the rhythm guitar player going forward. And this, ladies and gentlemen, solidifies what many call the golden lineup of Megadeth. Just rhythmically, everything they try is off the wall on here, like 5 Magics, where it sounds like they're playing backwards at one point. But the most famous song here is, of course, Hangar 18, a song that many of us Guitar Hero fans know for the fact that this song has 22 goddamn guitar solos in it. Although it's not thrash, it's more normal heavy metal in the song, it's ultimately still difficult with just the amount of guitar solo cramming, and it's an absolute classic about the Roswell alien incident.
It's a place where the government allegedly is housing foreign aircraft. They don't want to say alien aircraft, so they say foreign. Around the 50s or 60s, an aircraft had fallen to Earth, and through the crashing, when it plummeted to the ground, it had broken up, and the government covered it up. When a farmer had said that it was an aircraft, they said it was a weather balloon. So they sent out these bunch of G-men, they were called Men in Black, and they confiscated all the material, put it into Hangar 18, and there was a life form there. He was called a Gray. Nick, he's way into it. I mean, the guy thinks Jesus was a Martian.
Picking a best song here is damn near impossible, especially when the band is this on fire. But boy, oh boy, do I worship the song Take No Prisoners. You want to talk about unorthodox song structures and the band just going completely off the wall beginning to end? It's hard to even keep up on this song. Take No Prisoners takes the cake. This album's music is so good it just speaks for itself. Despite it being completely not commercial at all, it somehow ended up being their credibility album and ended up blowing the band up much more successfully. Is it the best heavy metal album of all time? I'm not sure. Maybe. I'd say it's just as good, if not maybe even possibly better than Peace Sells, but it's damn close. It's undeniable this album has magic to it. It doesn't necessarily have to be thrash or speed metal beginning to end. Many debate what the hell this album even is. All we know is that Megadeth just really threw their instruments to the wall, and that's what came out.
We are slowly but surely eliminating all the different animal species on the face of the planet. And as we keep picking off these other life forms, the only life form left will be man. And when it comes down to man hunting man, he'll hunt woman first.
All the material on Rust in Peace was pretty much, we went back into our files, and Dave and I were pulling out riff tapes, and he was pulling out lyrics from a long time ago, just kind of like trying to complete everything. Almost every bit of this, except for a couple of titles or a couple of riffs here and there, it was all stuff that has been created within the last couple years.
Megadeth was very, very, very busy and exhausted going into Countdown to Extinction. Not only did they completely blow their wad on Rust in Peace, not only did they do several soundtrack songs like Breakpoint that was done for the Super Mario movie, not only did they do the famous Clash of the Titans shows, which had Megadeth routinely competing against Slayer and Anthrax at their peaks, as well as the brand new band Alice in Chains. And not only did they do the iconic song Go to Hell for the second Bill and Ted movie, Bogus Journey, which was originally supposed to be called Bill and Ted Go to Hell.
That was the first song that all four of us had a contribution on.
A song that gets regularly accused of ripping off Enter Sandman because both came out at the same time. And not only was this made while the band was running in and out of rehearsal rooms in LA during the LA riots, ultimately the band completely ran out of old songs. They had nothing left. They locked in together, and as a group effort for the first time, they focused as a band effort, not just as the Dave Mustaine dictatorship. They realized they cannot go more intense than Rust in Peace, so what they did instead is focus on, can they write different kinds of songs and great songs. There's still tons of thrash and speed metal type stuff on here, like High Speed Dirt, Skin on My Teeth, Architecture of Aggression, which chunks like crazy, especially on the ending track, Ashes in Your Mouth, a very anti-war song that also has an amazing breakdown in the middle with guitar solo battles between Marty and Dave and some thrashing chugs.
Tomorrow.
But they experiment a lot on this album very successfully. Of course, just look at Sweating Bullets. A lot of people think that weirdness of that song, almost the cartoony nature of it, represents what every Megadeth song sounds like, and they avoid this band like the plague.
Hey Beavis, this guy talks like you.
No way, buddy.
He doesn't talk like me.
Even the title track is extremely different for them. Something the whole band contributed to, and I think MArty Friedman had a lot of influence going forward, a ton of melody content of the lead guitar parts. Of course, this song actually ended up getting them the Genesis Award by several different animal activist groups for talking about the decline of several different animal species across the planet. And speaking of the melody content, you have the very first arguably power ballad from the band with Foreclosure of a Dream, a song that was heavily written by David Ellefson, talking about an incident where his family had lost their farm, but more so focusing on the financial crisis that was going on at the time, and lies from several politicians, like, of course, the George H.W. Bush Read My Lips.
Political breakthrough, euphoria's high. Borrowed my name, I borrowed time. Foreclosure of a dream. Those visions never seen.
Even though Dave and the boys have a bit of a reputation for being overly political chuds, at this time they were very, very poignant, and they had their pulse on America to the point that Dave Mustaine was very famously on MTV's Rock the Vote, and has been credited as personally getting enough young people involved to help pass a very important voter registration law that made it way easier for people to vote.
There's a lot of people here that don't really like what's taking place in America. See, he knows his rights. Obviously, he knows where to get beer, too.
But it's not all rainbows and unicorns. In the song Symphony of Destruction, the absolute classic from the band, Dave Mustaine is talking about everything he hates about fake politicians. A song that was very inspired by that awesome old movie, The Manchurian Candidate.
It's about taking a normal human being and you put him into a political state, into a position of authority, and all of a sudden they become faultless, flawless. They can dictate to you whether or not you're going to live in freedom or you're going to be living within the confines of a penitentiary.
Obviously, it's the most famous commercial appealing Megadeth song of all time. It's really not that far off from stuff they had already done, like Peace Sells But Who's Buying, and some other songs like Go to Hell, like the slow mid-tempo chugging. It's still got that crunch it's still got that Megadeth nastiness.
Just like the Pied Piper, let the rats through the streets, dance like marionettes, swaying through the symphony.
Unorthodox song structures rear their ugly heads on one of my favorite songs on here, the song about the prison system, showing some of Dave's all-time great lyricism and storytelling, some killer riffs on Captive Honor.
Boy, your soul better belong to Jesus. Cause your ass belongs to me.
The guy's getting married in prison to a big black guy. I'd be scared, I'd be sad.
If I had to go with one song I love listening to the most, I just love the groovy swing of the song about the Marvel character Deathlock, Psychotron. Despite being the band kind of slowing down, I stand on business that this is not a sellout album. It is not a Black Album clone. It blows that album away. In fact, I think it is Megadeth's finest hour and one of the greatest metal albums of all time. It is just nothing but 11 perfect songs, no fillers, just nothing but meat on the bone. And it's everything I love about Megadeth, because stripped to their bare elements, it has the interesting songwriting from Dave Mustaine and just that nastiness that's at the core of the band that's been perfectly put here. It's by far the band's biggest album with several successful singles, sold multi-platinum, and was almost #1 in the Billboard charts, but infamously lost out to Billy Ray Cyrus, Achy Breaky Heart. And what's arguably an even bigger upset at the Grammys this time around, Megadeth had lost the Best Metal Grammy to 9 Inch Nails, which I love, but they are not a metal band. This undeniable success of the nastiest band in thrash actually allowed them to survive the 90s. And they do a couple more soundtrack songs like the badass 99 Ways to Die with amazing vocals from Dave Mustaine, which is fitting that they put this on the compilation soundtrack for the show Beavis and Butthead, considering how much Beavis actually sounds like Dave Mustaine.
We're not ready to see you yet. 99 ways to die.
Diadems was in the under-the-radar horror movie Demon Knight, but my favorite of all these soundtrack songs, the slow, grinding, groovy, and catchy-ass Angry Again, which ended up in the very underrated, misunderstood Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie Last Action Hero. A lot of people take that movie seriously. It is a parody.
Engaged in crime, I grasp my throat, enraged my mind starts to smoke, enforce a mental overload, angry again.
There's tons of self-sabotage, drug relapses at the time. They had started a tour with Aerosmith, and a couple dates in had already gotten kicked off the tour. And right as the band was supposed to have a huge concert in Japan at the Budokan Arena that MArty was literally like leaking in his panties over.
This is great. This is better than being on the top of the charts, you know, Cheap Trick at Budokan, Megadeth at the Budokan. We're here.
I was covered in sweat and piss and everything, and then I died.
We had to really just stop and just go, wow. I mean, Dave was almost a goner. If we would have continued on the road, it probably would have been one of those stories where rock star found dead in a hotel room.
It wasn't like, dude, I want to take this away from you guys. I want to deprive you of this cool chance.
This really upset MArty's weeaboo ass, and Dave Mustaine and the band had to really get themselves back together, because at this point, like, Dave Mustaine is a father.
You ready to be a dad? No, but it's going to be nice to have a gardener in a few years.
Where can the band go from here at the height of their success?
There's a connotation that goes along with the word commercial, which means getting bent over a couch or selling out or something like that. And, you know, it's just uncomfortable for me to admit that anything that we've ever done is commercial. But I do agree that it is very melodic and it's very accessible.
A lot of the songs had started to take on a little bit more of a heavy metal tempo. One of Max Norman's secrets when we did Youthanasia, he said, that the tempos were going to be all in a certain neighborhood, because the tempo of 120 beats per minute is the secret tempo for radio songs.
After several attempts at sobriety, hard relapses, literal deaths, self-doubt, issues with family members and wives, internal fighting amongst the band members over songwriting and creative control, and literal group therapy crybaby sessions. That's right, all you Megadeth fans that complain all day about how Metallica are a bunch of losers that need therapy because of the Some Kind of Monster movie, Megadeth went to therapy first, buddy.
Why did you have this therapist guy with you? Was it just to help you keep things in perspective?
We started doing that about 3 years ago.
They ultimately went into the studio with nothing, and in group sessions, they wrote stuff on the spot in the studio. It's sort of a dichotomy of this album where musically, they'll have some heavy grooves, some heavy riffs, heavier and darker than ever before, and then some of the best melodies and more accessible songwriting that they've ever had. But ultimately very dour 90s lyrics, like on songs such as Family Tree. A lot of important elements of the song were written by Junior, and Marty is the ace in the hole in this song. All those amazing melodic lead guitar lines just bleed through.
I was never incested, but I know people who have been, and it talks about things that have been begging to be written about. You know?
It's quite difficult to confront those kind of subjects, isn't it? Because a lot of people aren't very open-minded to deal with them.
Well, if you have no balls, you can't confront those kind of songs, but I'm pretty sure that people know that I do, and that I will.
And this yin and yang, best shown in the song, really is the reason why people worship this album. Many think it's Megadeth's finest hour. Now, it's far from grunge and it's far from a sellout album. I mean, look at the goddamn album cover, guys. That's the most metal-looking thing I've ever seen. But the edginess of this album actually very much harmed sales and promotion for this album. They were supposed to have a huge breakout power ballad on here. That'd be their big moment. They were throwing all the momentum into this song, but right as they were at the cusp of having their biggest hit ever with the song Tout le Monde, it was ultimately banned from MTV and radio because they thought it was a song about taking your own life.
When people have a loved one that dies and they end on a bad note, you know, they wish that they could say something to them. So this is an opportunity for the deceased to say something before they go.
I can't even fathom how much this hurt the album, because it is an amazing song. It's an iconic song from the band, and it had zero push to it. But I think it could have also benefited from not having a weird French title that almost no one understands. Like, can a white boy speak a little bit Francais?
I had a French girlfriend, when we would make love, would speak French to me, and I was thinking, I'm really good.
But despite the different direction they mostly take on this album, there's still some heavy riffs, and there's still a lot of thrashing and even more up-tempo songs in here. Like, look at the opening track, Reckoning Day, one of the most killer songs they've ever done.
Reckoning Day, I was driving in my SL convertible in Phoenix. We just moved there. I didn't know what a monsoon was, and I was caught in one. And I showed up to the studio, and I was soaking. There was like 2 inches of water on my floorboards, and I went in there and I started punching my guitar.
And they just tried to be heavier. They changed their tuning to be a little bit lower. They played heavier riffs, and Dave's voice is arguably his best vocal performance of all time, getting real gnarly and real nasty. But I think another screw up with this album is that they made Train of Consequences the lead single. Almost every single song on here would have been a better, more catchy, more accessible song. Like my favorite song on here, the beautiful, melodic, amazingly sung Addicted to Chaos. I'm addicted. Honestly, my biggest hang-up with this album, other than the fact that it's very similar beginning to end, is the fact that the ending track on here tries to be an ode to the band's catalog, referencing several of their song titles in like a weird We Didn't Start the Fire type of thing, but it just feels extremely forced. I I love this album. Most of us fans love it. It's a different venture outside of the classic 80s era of the band, and it offers some different things. Do I think it's the best album the band's ever done? Hell no, but it's certainly both gone through the phase of being overrated to then underrated to then overrated again. So to try to fix the momentum of the band, David actually hooked up with Foreigner's manager Bud Prager to try to rework and rewrite lyrics to all these songs he was working for on the next album.
Bud comes in and he starts working with me, and we looked at the lyrics and made all the lyrics work and made all the melodies and everything work. He'd sold over 80 million records in America alone. And I thought, okay, my 20 million records around the world, your 80 million records in America. He's got me.
This record was absolutely effortless. You know, the band, I mean, you know, we couldn't have got any closer if we would have had sex with one another.
So he got clean off of heroin for a good while, inspiring a very important song, which is actually about a friend of his that was ruining his life with heroin, was on the street at the time. Use the Man.
It's like, you know, people go to these places where they stand up and say, hi, my name is Dave and I'm an addict and an alcoholic. You know, that's cool for me, but I gotta tell the truth, I'm a dope-seeking missile.
And yes, there's a lot of accessible elements on here. The band's basically Enter Sandman moment with Trust, the opening track that has the slow build-up, the mid-tempo, awesome riff. Cryptic Writings is way more diverse than Youthanasia was, which seemed to be focusing all in the same direction, all the same gear. Cryptic Writings focuses on 3 distinct different styles. That very commercialized element, which we've already talked about, especially on songs like I'll Get Even and Almost Honest. Another third of this album is experimental outside of the box stuff that they'd never done before, focusing on stuff like funk or groove or blues stuff, and especially getting weird, bringing in the sitar on my all-time favorite song here, Secret Place. And even with the experimentation, they must have been really hitting the iron hot because it was one of 4 big Billboard successful singles.
But everyone just runs away. There's a secret place I like to go.
But then the other third of this album is just straight up balls to the wall, classic Megadeth style speed metal and thrash metal. We're of course talking about underrated songs like Vortex, Fight for Freedom, which is basically a Motor Breath ripoff, and of course the infamous chugging thrashing of She-Wolf.
Bite of the she-wolf. My desires of flesh obey me. The lioness will enslave me.
As good as it is, Youthanasia kind of is a one-trick pony. If that album tires and bores you to hell, you'll at least get some of what you're looking for on Cryptic Writings, which to me, as much as I love Youthanasia, I do think Cryptic Writings is the better album. I think it's a fantastic album. With many of these commercialized radio rock elements on the album, I want to talk about the fact that many Megadeth fans will say the dumbest things like, all these other bands sold out, and Megadeth never sold out, and Dave Mustaine always says he never sold out.
The thing that I have as far as an asset would be integrity, and not ever having to compromise my musical approach towards doing what I feel is right.
Yeah, I want to stay at a street level because then I don't have any, you know, pretentious values in life, and I don't start writing music just for the dollar sign.
Except at this time, Dave Mustaine and the band admits to deliberately chasing radio and Billboard success.
This works, more of this will work even better. So we went in that same direction on Risk.
I don't care. I think Cryptic Writings is awesome, no matter what it is. But it is deliberately trying to sell out, if you believe in that. Megadeth was considering dissolving around this time, and Dave Mustaine had a very underrated side project, MD45, which is him doing hardcore punk style stuff, which many people just dubbed the Lost Megadeth album anyways. And the talks about Megadeth ending ultimately culminated in Dave Mustaine wrongly firing Nick Menza. Now, Dave Mustaine to this day insists that Nick was a liar And David Ellefson even recently said that he just seemed very out of it during the end of one of the shows, and he couldn't seem to keep up anymore. Now, unfortunately to these line idiots, there is a thing called the internet and YouTube, and the internet lasts forever. And there is evidence of every show Nick Menza did at this time, including the one they referenced that he was struggling. And he sounds more on fire than the rest of the band. He had fired Nick while he was getting cancer treatment for his knee and accused Nick of making that up and making an excuse, saying, oh, he's lying about having cancer because he can't play anymore. When literally everyone else in the situation insists, yeah, no, Nick Menza definitely had a cancer scare with his leg. Nick Menza, even though it's possible he had a drug problem, it's possible he could have been a liar, it's possible he could have been a weird guy, which he was, he ultimately, by all other accounts other than Dave Mustaine, sounds like a really nice guy. But I think the real reason is that he was constantly arguing with Dave Mustaine about stuff. He seemed very argumentative, and he doesn't seem like the kind of person that'd be a yes man. Dave Mustaine has had many nasty fallouts with band members, but the one with Nick Menza is by far the worst, and this is unfortunately never rectified. In fact, he's tried to bring him back many times, including the early 2000s, once again insisting that he couldn't play anymore, that he wanted to fight with everyone.
I want to make something that, you know, that if you're a guy, it makes you, you know, say, yeah, and if you're a woman, it makes you, you know, say, you know, yeah, you know, but in a different way, like, yeah.
We went back even into the 70s and maybe even some of the music from the 60s, just in the sense that how they wrote songs. They wrote them around vocals, they wrote them around the singer, which is kind of untraditional for Megadeth because generally we would sort of write a song from the middle out. We would start with a guitar riff.
So by this point, Megadeth was straying pretty far away from their typical gunmetal gray attitude, and they were doing stuff like Megadeth Unplugged, and things got very risky when Lars Ulrich suggested to Dave that he should take more risks, hence birthing the band's most hated album, an album that has very little metal elements and very much is 90s pop rock.
We knew it was going to be one of those records that is going to be hit or miss in a very big way. It's either going to be enormous or it's going to be a terrible failure. That's why we called it Risk.
Showing Dave doubling down on the stuff that he was doing on Cryptic Writings, and once again working with the producer of that album, Dan Huff. And he actually works his ass off on this album, adding a lot of extra elements like grunge and industrial stuff in here, but ultimately spent a lot of time working with Dave Mustaine to turn him into a singer-songwriter.
When I stepped in, we started an idea that Dave was going to be a singer now. And the process was, it was interesting. It wasn't, I can't say it wasn't painful. You know, Dave is the kind of guy, he walks into the studio and you say, you know, Dave, you're going to warm up your voice? And Dave looked at me like, what? Huh? I said, you know, you're going to warm up, do some vocal exercises. He grabbed a waist bag and he went, okay, I'm ready. And that was it.
Can't get any younger. Time has brutal hunger. Time taking time is taking mine.
To be completely honest with you guys, there's some slightly weaker stuff on here, but I actually don't mind Risk at all. I don't even think it's close to Megadeth's worst album. There's so many other albums that people would be shocked to think I actually think are way less listenable. At worst, it's a solid rock album. And at worst, you have songs like Crush 'Em, which is kind of catchy, but pretty damn goofy, I will not lie. A song that was written and designed to be a halftime anthem for sports events. It was actually also used in the sequel to Universal Soldier Return, the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, and scenes from that are in the music video. But if I can't have Risk at its worst, I don't want it at its best, because when it's at its best, it actually does get really heavy with the metal. Songs like The Doctor's Calling has some straight up doom riffs. Time the End is thrashy and chunky as hell. But of course, the heaviest, best, darkest song on here is a song that to this day the band opens their concerts with, Prince of Darkness. And no, it's not about the devil, it's about Dave's hardest addiction to overcome.
Alcohol.
For me, that's my Prince of Darkness. Well, I mean, for some people, it could be a Twinkie or something, you know, if they're obese.
Your satanic highness.
MArty really gets to shine and spread his wings, and he has probably his most co-writing credits on this album, especially on the song about the destitute and poor, Breadline. But working on the solo for the song actually really pissed him off and was one of the big reasons why he ended up leaving. It's because he put all this work and time and effort into the solo, and without any heads up, they had deleted it completely off the album. I don't care if it's not really metal. It's a nice evolution and detour from Cryptic Writings, and the remaster actually makes the guitars sound way heavier, so if you need that sound, the remaster's okay. It sucks we lost Nick Menza too, but they also brought on the extremely underrated and talented Jimmy DeGrasso. I ultimately like all kinds of music, and if they want to experiment, if it's done well, I like it. The performances are good, songs are good, album's good. This album flopped atrociously. It is, to this day, brought up in conversations with the most hated metal album of all time, despite Super Collider nowadays actually getting more hatred from the fan base overall. But MArty ended up leaving the band in the wake of all this. It was the only member I can think of in Megadeth's history where Dave was devastated for them to leave and begged and pleaded on his hands and knees for him to stay, but MArty just wanted to paint with colors, I guess.
You know, if your name is Megadeth, you can't have a very colorful palette. You know what I mean? Your music is gunmetal gray. You know what I mean? I like to, paint with purple and yellow and green and orange and red and black and white.
But what's really annoying is Dave can't really ever take accountability for anything, and he blames the deliberate sellout of this album and the weird directions of it completely on MArty, the producer, Dan Huff, Bud Prager.
Well, I think that Bud was responsible for the band losing its way.
Everyone else except himself, even though he's the captain of the ship.
When we made this record, we thought that this was probably going to be our last record because we were with Capitol Records in America.
Yeah, I heard that.
And our contract was up, and we didn't know whether we were going to keep doing this or not. And we just made a record that when we were done, we felt that when people listened to it, we weren't going to go out like punks.
The metal scene in America disappeared. The metal magazines folded, the metal stations went away, Headbangers Ball on MTV went away. There was no place for metal bands anymore. They even said if you were a metal band, you were dead. So instead of breaking up, we kind of adjusted our music a little bit to stick around until the scene came back. And fortunately for us now, the scene is strong in America again.
Speaking of being a captain of a ship, going into World Needs a Hero, Dave was saying vague things about how this album is a ship lost at sea finding its way back home or something like that. So many fans thought that this album was going to be the huge return of Megadeth. You have Vic Rattlehead bursting out in this awesome album cover, the old logo's back, the return of thrash metal Megadeth. This ain't no comeback at all. In fact, it's one of the weakest Megadeth albums, and Risk is much better. It has so many things going wrong with it. Now, it's not atrocious. There's definitely some solid songs on here, like the opener Disconnect, which sounds a lot like Sucking My Love from Diamond Head. And speaking of Diamond Head, the ending track on this album, a lot of people give grief to. The lengthy epic known as When. The intro of it, I absolutely love. It's him reusing the stuff that was used on Call of Cthulhu, that chord progression. But when the song kicks in with the riffs, it's basically an Am I Evil clone. But I kind of get where he was going with this, and I ultimately don't really mind this song.
When I was in Metallica, the Diamond Head songs, they didn't know those were cover songs. So that really formed a lot of who we were. And I think that if Diamond Head really got the credit for being the stone that Metallica was shaped out of, they probably would have been much more popular.
Even when it's thrashy, it seems like it's just dragging its ass at a mid-tempo pace with several forgettable songs. You have a sequel to Hangar 18, which feels more like a punkier version of it, and even the solo of that kind of sounds like The Conjuring, but that song I don't really mind. But then you have Dread and the Fugitive Mind, which is probably the best song on here, and even that, rhythmically, is very, very close to the, of course, schizophrenic episode that happened on Sweating Bullets.
Ask for mercy. To walk alone.
Once again, it's one of the weakest Megadeth lineups, but what's funny is Al Pitrelli is arguably the most important, most famous, and richest member to ever play in Megadeth that wasn't Dave himself. Maybe even more rich than Dave, because Al Pitrelli was always the music director of Trans-Siberian Orchestra, long-serving member of Sabotage, but nowadays, he actually owns and runs the company of Trans-Siberian Orchestra, so the guy's got to be completely loaded.
And I looked at him and I thought, the dressing room toilet's got to be clogged because this guy's got to be a plumber. And I asked him, I said, are you the plumber? And he goes, no, I'm Al Pitrelli. And I went...
But he co-wrote the song Promises, and stuff like that is really his forte, and I think they did a damn good job on the song. Yeah, there's a lot of solid stuff on here, but there's a lot of just straight up garbo, throw it out, the worst Megadeth songs ever. We're talking about songs like the title track, which is goofy as hell, sounds like Looney Tunes music, and then, good God, Burning Bridges is the most annoying song ever written.
Wouldn't be burning bridges all the time.
And Losing My Senses is by far one of the worst metal songs I've ever heard. I don't know who this is for. It is completely unlistenable. The floor of this album is so low, it's in the bowels of hell, to the point that Motorcycle, the embarrassing try-hard, we're trying to be cool kids song, is actually one of the more middling tracks on here.
You can see some of these hip-hop videos where the girls have got like nickels over their nipples, and these are chubby white girls with their t-shirts cut a little bit. You can see some cleavage and you can't show that.
Even though I don't think it's the worst album they've ever done, it's pretty damn mediocre and weak sauce. I don't know why more people don't bring this up as the worst Megadeth album, especially compared to Risk. Risk is infinitely more confident and capable than this. Apparently Dave was on pills and super depressed at the time and was thinking about making this the ending of the band. Right after they did the Capital Punishment compilation, which had the awesome Kill the King and the Rude Awakening live album, Dave had an accident that almost completely destroyed his ability to play guitar while he was in rehab.
I'd fallen asleep on a chair, just innocently like this with my arm over the back of it. And the top of the chair had pushed against the inside of my arm right here, and it cut the circulation off to the nerve. So I went to a doctor, and the doctor goes, oh, no, you'll never play again.
That was when he called me, and he said, David, I quit Megadeth, and I want to turn everything over to you so that you can, you know, move forward with this.
And then I thought, wait a second, Dave, you know who you are. You know, you have been through everything, and you've always come out swinging, and you're always the last man standing, no matter what.
System is fair. The chair. The rope's tight, just like one quick wrench. The truth is out.
I want to play metal guitar. You know, I don't care about being successful on the radio or with MTV, because it doesn't really, it doesn't translate when you try to be successful. If you're true to yourself and you are successful, that's fantastic.
With what was going on in the world and in the world of metal, and the band failing to live up to the moment with World Needs a Hero, the time was ripe for Megadeth. Everything was working against Dave, and he had to prove himself. He had nobody this time around, and then he had a huge falling out with David Ellefson, resulting them in suing each other over the rights of the band. Ultimately, David Ellefson lost. So he whipped some amazing studio members together like Vinny Colaiuta.
Vinny Colaiuta. Dumbass.
Vinny is probably the most talented drummer to ever perform with Megadeth ever. The guy is a renowned jazz giant. And speaking of jazz giants, Dave couldn't get anyone to play guitar, so he reached far back into the band's history and brought back the best guitar player they ever had, Chris Poland. I think his solos on here are better than anything he's ever done, and Dave worked his ass like a slave. And to me, Tears in a Vial, screw Tornado Souls, Tears in a Vial is the best guitar solo of all time.
I must have done 20 takes, 20 solos before he would even, you know, say, okay, now we're getting somewhere. So, yeah, I was tired at the end of the day when Dave was there.
This is return of great Megadeth, full stop, because the direction of this was to make every single song feel like a different era or album of the band. And that's right, just about half the album focuses on that old school 80s speed and thrash metal, and they actually hit the goddamn gas this time around with absolute bangers like Blackmail the Universe, constant riff changes, solos, and high tempos. Unorthodox song structures are back, baby. Even the album covers going forward are very political once again. Kick the Chairs of Thrashy song about the corrupt justice system. Back in the day, it's an awesome ripping speed metal song, literally about the formation of speed and thrash metal, and a song that ended up famously in the kids TV show with the entire band playing this song in Duck Dodgers.
Look, honey, you can watch Daddy in a cartoon instead of seeing a festival where some girl's showing her tits, you know what I mean? I don't mind that very much if they're nice, but, you know, the thing is, I don't want my daughter to see it because she's a baby still. She's only 9.
And the catchy Died Dead Enough, which was actually supposed to be in the Lara Croft movie, but the band's management, as we'll kind of keep hearing, seemed to keep writing these checks that their ass could not cash. Songs like the melodic Tears in a Vial and Something That I'm Not, which has a sick killer groove to it. It feels like it's straight off of Cryptic Writings. A song that is a middle finger to Lars Ulrich. As we all know, Dave did that famous therapy session with Lars Ulrich in the Metallica Some Kind of Monster documentary. And Dave apparently was not happy about this being included in the movie at all.
September 11th in 2001, our country was attacked. Whether it was an inside job or not, nobody really has figured it out yet. And in the meanwhile, we were in Seattle, had to cancel our show out of respect to the nation, went into Canada, played the next day on the 12th, and I was supposed to fly home on the 13th for my 40th birthday. Well, all the planes were grounded, so I had to ride in a bus from Canada all the way to San Francisco. Couldn't go to Phoenix, and by the time I did get to San Francisco, I was pretty upset. Because, you know, I'm thinking I can't go home, I can't. My birthday party, I spent my night with him. I'll do it, but you know what I want? I want to be able to have the right of refusal. And I said, after it was done, I said, I don't want to do it. And they went and did it anyway.
But no one loves you very much. And when you try to change me and try to replace me.
The song that is very, very clearly the Risk song on here, Of Mice and Men, blows everything off that album away, showing that when backed into a corner, Dave could really deliver with incredible melodic songwriting. This album is honestly my personal favorite Megadeth album. It's the one I listen to the most. It gets literally everything right I love about the band, tackling every single era of the band and doing it exceptionally well on top form. And if I had to pick a song, which would be extremely difficult, I might have to go with the song that really got me hooked on this album. The venomous song Scorpion, which Dave sings amazingly well. And if you had to pick one album of Dave's best singing, I think his best work is definitely in this era. And it's funny because Dave actually ended up in that TV show Black Scorpion around this time. How poetic that Dave being backed into a corner completely alone, desperately needing to prove himself, would give such a great album. An album that's underrated. No one seems to talk about it for some reason. I'm so glad we get to rectify that because there's a lot of good stuff after this. Screw it. Best album since Countdown to Extinction, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. Long live Dave, the king, making his return so profound he relearned how to play guitar and did it better than he could before.
Thank God that they're doing guitar solos again. Part of the reason people didn't do guitar solos is because they couldn't. You know, again, going back to the Pro Tools generation and cutting and pasting. You know, and then what do they do? Pawn at the ground. Guitar solos aren't cool. Well, that's like saying oxygen isn't cool, you retard.
When it's right, you can't be any more than you are right now. The UN is undone. Another mushroom cloud.
The System Has Failed was actually a solo record, and I found out in the middle of doing that record for my publishing company that in order for me to go forward as an artist, I owed them another Megadeth record, and I took the risk of changing it back to a Megadeth record. Bottom line is it sounds like a Megadeth record, and I fulfilled my commitment, but then when I met Glenn, we started playing together, and then his brother came into the picture, and we had another bass player at the time, and just playing with Glenn and Shawn was so rewarding for me, playing with people again who really love to play music.
But Dave kind of feeling lonely. He contemplated wanting to just break the band up, going solo for good. He announced in the very famous Live of Buenos Aires video that Megadeth will continue with their new lineup at the time, which consisted of James LoMenzo on bass, and the Drover brothers on guitar and drums. I think Glen Drover is a pretty damn underrated guitar player in the band. No one ever seems to mention him, and his solos rip. But Shawn Drover seems to get a lot of people's ire because he's not exactly one of Megadeth's best drummers. The guy had barely any experience even before joining the band.
Called Shawn. He came out 4 days of rehearsal, drove to Reno with me on the 5th day, 6th day. He's headlining in Megadeth, and he tells me after the concert, this is my 3rd show ever.
Obviously, I don't think it's as good as System Has Failed, and some even argue the album after this is better. But what's great about it is that, although it's not as consistent, it is much heavier. However, the negative side of that is that the lyrics and themes get very, very cringy for a little bit. Now, Dave becoming a born-again Christian, he also became a born-again conspiracy theorist, obsessing with certain things like, of course, the NWO and the Illuminati. But there's a lot of great songs that are birthed from this transformation, Dave Mustaine, like the title track with the goofy lyric, "The UN is right, you can't be any more un," and "Blessed are the Dead" about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and of course, "Washington is Next," constantly quoting segments of the Bible, and many people think is very influenced from Wasted Years by Iron Maiden. But heck, even the album covers of Peace Cells and this album are rip-offs of the 2 Minutes to Midnight single cover from Iron Maiden.
And one of the captions in there, it said, "Washington is next." And it said that in September, Washington was going to be hit by terrorists. Now, this is a magazine that was dated August 3rd.
False king to the throne. Washington is next.
And speaking of Dave becoming a born-again Christian, he had several different dramas going on with different bands he was supposed to do shows with or tour with. He infamously blackballed the band Rotting Christ because he didn't like their name and their theme, and famously gotten the very popular black metal band Dissection kicked off of a tour, which prompted John from Dissection to threaten Dave Mustaine and challenged him to a fight, a battle of good and evil, to which Dave Mustaine literally showed up to fist fight with him. And according to him, John did not show up and pussied out of it and said, well, it was more of a metaphorical battle of wits. But anyways, back to the album, there's a lot of killer, underrated stuff on here, like the song Gears of War. Now, I'm a big gearhead. Well, not that kind of gearhead. I love the Gears of War franchise, and this was supposed to be the theme song for the first game. And once again, the label or management dropped the ball here, and they couldn't get the song out to them in time. But it's like, why not at least put this in Gears of War 2, the much superior game anyways? But we of course have to talk about the re-recording of A Tout Le Monde. Now, there was a mass shooting that had went down in Montreal where the killer claimed that Megadeth had inspired him, which put Dave Mustaine, unfortunately, in the hot seat. But this is not the 80s anymore.
Well, what about, the guys that were listening to, Beethoven before they went and killed somebody?
And this coincided with Dave Mustaine wanting to remake this song, which he originally wanted to be a bonus track. The label insisted to include it, so he wanted to do it as a duet with a woman, this time getting Christina Scabbia from Lacuna Coil, or as I call them, Lacuna Matata. Mind if a white girl sing a little Francais?
When the song basically got banned by MTV in America, the radio stations in America followed MTV too, so the song pretty much didn't get its chance. Living with that, it just continued to eat at me, and I thought, it would be really great at some point to try and work the song back into some kind of reintroduction to the world.
Got banned again. Again? Yes. So I figured I'm done with it. It says, I'd love to stay.
But when this album's bad, it's downright goofy as hell with stuff like America Stand, from New York Guitar to Calitharabia.
Hey, Jihad Joe, guess what? We're coming to get you!
But who cares, because they have all-time greats on this album, like one of my favorite Megadeth songs of all time, the opening track, the thrashy, crushing Sleepwalker.
When I'm dead to the whole wide world, no one is safe when I close my eyes.
Now, Megadeth decided to continue, and they wanted to make their own Ozfest going forward. So for the next several years, Megadeth would do what was called the Gigantour. However, in the aftermath of Super Collider, the band would slowly start to lose momentum, and nowadays struggle to even be the headliner of festivals or their own damn tours.
You talk about these greedy, corrupt megacorporations. From your own research, what do you believe their end game is?
Me as a Christian, I believe that it's one world government, one world currency. There's going to be a cataclysmic
ramping up of all of these things that we're seeing right now, and it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse, and we're watching our country disintegrate right now, and it's scary.
This is the end game.
President Bush had okayed the use of force to detain legal, lawful U.S. citizens if they contribute to the wrong party.
Even though the last album was the return of thrash Megadeth, Endgame still blows it away in its intensity. Just right out the gate with an opening instrumental that is just nothing but guitar solos, and to probably my favorite song on the album, This Day We Fight, an unrelenting speed metal attack that's basically Guitar Hero core, and a song that's about, of course, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, the speech that Aragorn gives as they charge the Black Gate.
It is not this day! This day we fight! Strength the fallen heroes, finish off the wounded.
Once again, this album shares a lot of the same weaknesses. Its weaker moments are songs that have just bizarre lyrics that don't seem to fit, and Dave shoving way too much of his conspiracy theory obsession. And look, I like me some conspiracy theories. Obviously, Dave, especially in the 80s and 90s, was very right about a lot of the political opinions he had and about how the world works.
We're ignorant. We cannot have an uprising against them. Education equals anarchy in a fascist regime. Being alive in society right now is doing a prison term. And their term's going to be up pretty soon. And they want to have the most cushiest gig that they can have while they're alive.
But come on, citing Alex Jones as being the inspiration for the title of this album and the title track, just because the guy is occasionally correct about some things that he probably read somewhere, the guy literally used to say that the government was controlling us with electromagnetic light energy, and if a new world order actually happened, the guy would literally cheerlead it. So the guy is no visionary. He's a charlatan. So yeah, some of the stuff on here is very boomery, but there is a lot of good lyrics on here tackling things like the financial crisis at the time and the Great Recession. Songs like Bite the Hand, which is attacking the greedy Wall Street executives, and of course the grinding song The Right to Go Insane, which is talking about the people struggling out there just trying to make check to check. And funnily enough, the music video is Dave Mustaine driving around in a tank.
Got nothing left to choose, so I think I'll go insane. My stomach aches.
But there is a very important new element to this album that many say is the reason this album has been injected with so much energy. The new lead guitar player, Chris Broderick, the neoclassically trained ripper. And yes, the guy can be a little bit too shreddy and do a little bit of shredsturbation, and some of his solos aren't super memorable because he just goes off as technical as humanly possible, but his influence is very felt in one of the best songs on here. It's extremely different and very melodic and symphonic. We're of course talking about The Hardest Part of Letting Go, Sealed with a Kiss.
The Hardest Part of Letting Go, I wrote about me and my wife Pam. My wife thinks I want to brick her into a wall somewhere, so she didn't like the song, but Chris actually contributed on that, and it went from being a good song to being something that was really a masterpiece.
But this album keeps the intensity consistent beginning to end because of course they shacked up with Andy Sneap to produce it, and he's well known for giving every single metal band he works with high octane energy, and it cannot be better felt than on the single and first song we heard from this thing, the song that ripped our head off quite literally with Head Crusher, a song about an evil medieval torturing device, and a song that actually was co-written by Shawn Drover. It is a fantastic album. Many see this as the return to form of the band.
It has 13 tracks on it, and the significance of it being called 13 is it's my 13th record. I started playing when I was 13. I was born on the 13th.
We really didn't get a chance to luxury of taking our time. We'd come off the road and somebody had said, you know, you've got about a 2-month period. Do you think you can make a record in there? And I laughed. Can't put a horse away wet after you've run him in a race. You gotta let him cool off, and it seemed like we just came off the last tour and just went right into the studio.
Now, admittedly, there was a lot going on in the world of Megadeth while they were making 13. Obviously, they were extremely rushed by the label to make some tour dates, especially the big 4 shows that they were doing. Megadeth playing with Slayer, Anthrax, and of course, his old band Metallica. But the very interesting thing about this tour and the Rest in Peace anniversary shows is that they brought back old bass player David Ellefson into the band. Now you'd think, oh my god, with Junior back, the next album's gonna be fantastic, he's gonna co-write some songs again. Well, not exactly. 13, although not bad, it's an extremely rushed, sloppy, patchworked album. And then with them forcing this 13th theme, it just has way too many songs already. And they cobbled together old songs that were either unfinished, like Millennium the Blind, that were finished this time around and made much better and much heavier, or songs that were like Japanese edition songs like Black Swan, or soundtrack songs like the ripping Never Dead or Sudden Death, which was written for Guitar Hero, literal Guitar Hero core.
So then when we turned the song back in, and it was all said and done, they said, can you put some more solos on it? And I was like, are you kidding? Saying that to me is like going to a fat kid and saying, you want some pudding?
Wicked highness, born from disaster, to dominate and kill.
And for the most part, those end up being the better songs on here, because a majority of this album ends up being weird commercial hard rock, which I blame squarely at the feet of their new producer they acquired, Johnny K, who's mostly known for working with modern hard rock bands. There's just embarrassing crap on here like We the People and Wrecker. But even in the worst situation, Dave can't help himself not to write some absolute bangers, like of course Public Enemy #1, a song about Al Capone. And a weird ass music video with a monkey driving a car around being chased by a monkey cop.
Public Enemy #1, a stolen car and I'm on the run. Through the night till the...
There's some damn good hidden gems in there, especially like my favorite song here, the heavy, ripping, evil sounding Deadly Nightshade.
Drive the blind, you're getting tired there, alive. Don't close your eyes.
At this point, Dave Mustaine's vocals really started to fall off a cliff. His voice just could not hit these notes anymore, and going forward they would down tune, and his voice would sound much deeper.
I wish I could tell you more, but until it's done, I would just be, it's like trying to tell a virgin what an orgasm feels like. I don't know.
Till the world explodes, till the world explodes, just like a super collider, on the high road.
Johnny's done a couple bands out here. He worked with Disturbed and worked with Machine Head, and he's worked with a couple other bands that I know of. Stained.
You have to wait. Right on the road.
Oh my God! The whole
What a start!
What happened? The plane crashed. What happened?
He didn't have the one-way ding down.
We should have known what would happen with Super Collider. There were a lot of red flags going into this. Obviously, they were working with Johnny K once again, and they left Roadrunner and made their own label, which I think contributes a lot to why Megadeth seem to be losing a lot of steam, especially with selling albums, with having to make their own label, with having to do crowdfunding for Dystopia. I think Dave Mustaine is just way too distracted, way too tempted to things like radio and doing things outside the box and not doing things that he's best at, because once again, this is pretty much Risk Part 2. It's them trying to do what's modern and big at the time, trying to be almost like a Disturbed ripoff, which makes sense that they literally get David Draymond, the Israeli terrorist, to do vocals in the best song on here, Dance in the Rain. But the reason this song works is because it is super melodic and actually works with some good-ass riffs and storytelling.
Never see a ray of daylight. So far in debt, you're struggling to survive, but you will break your back fighting.
But why this album does not work is that a majority of it is trying to be so radio friendly, has way too much modern production, drudgy playing, the band is not nearly as young as they used to be, and at this point Dave's vocals are at the bottom of the barrel. Like, he can't do anything like this, so it feels embarrassing every time he tries to sing on here. And even in some of the songs where he tries to do thrashy stuff, it's like he's straining his voice. But ultimately the material on here is just not very good. Even at its best moments, like people will say stuff like Kingmaker, So Amazing, even that is just a complete ripoff of Black Sabbath's Children of the Grave.
Persecuting their own kind, there's nothing you can say. Don't ask anyone for help, they won't know what to
otherwise wouldn't really care, but Dave Mustaine makes such an ass out of himself to constantly complain about how other bands are so unoriginal and uncreative.
There's a lot of bands that, they don't really have a deep talent pool, so they can't write a lot of different songs. They're very similar in nature. Part of the way I stay excited is I have a very, very intense critiquing method that I use. Can't sound the same, can't have the same concept lyrically.
But there's some hidden gems on here, especially like the song The Blackest Crow, which is a very banjo, rockin', almost dark country type song. A song that's about Dave Mustaine's mother-in-law suffering with Alzheimer's.
The thing is, she looks totally normal and healthy, but she's just not there anymore, and it's so sad because, I want to say, come on, I know you're in there, but you can't.
This cold, empty house is so quiet now she's gone. The dust accumulates into...
This was seen as a shocking late career embarrassment, and so many people hated it at the time. And because of this album, I believe they'd start to lose a ton of momentum. But honestly, I think if they had just done more stuff like Dance in the Rain, and that was the full direction of the album, and they put that much effort into all the songs, I would have thought this was better than 13 or even Endgame.
We went back to making music for ourselves. We've been saying that so much, and then you get into the studio and people start saying, well, this sounds like it could be a radio song, let's put this one out. And everybody who's working on the project are metal fans. They're not like people who are in the music business and that, this is one of their accounts. Well, what's a Megadeth? I don't know what those guys are about.
Super Collider and the situation of the band was so stinky that almost the entire lineup quit. Shawn Drover and Chris Broderick felt like they just could not expand musically, and considering the band that they did afterwards was unlistenably terrible and pretty close to some of the garbage that they co-wrote on Super Collider, it was needed that they would leave the band because they just did not understand what Megadeth was supposed to be at all. And Dave needed to reconnect what Megadeth was supposed to be about. So he tried to get the Rust in Peace lineup back together, and once again, in typical Dave fashion, was not offering what they were deserved and owed, and offering them pennies essentially. And in typical Dave fashion, instead of just admitting that they wouldn't take the offer he gave them, said that, well, Marty just wanted to write terrible stuff that was J-pop, and Nick couldn't play anymore. Even though, once again, there is video evidence of Dave Mustaine's own son recording Nick Menza jamming with them and sounded completely fine. And I bet Dave really regrets the asinine way he treated Nick Menza, because when Nick died on stage, all of a sudden Dave's tune completely changes about Nick Menza going forward and would cry about him and stuff. It's like, you constantly disrespected the guy in life, and now you want to be somber in death. So Dave and Dave were once again alone, backed into a corner, and needed to prove themselves and dig themselves out of this embarrassing hole that Super Collider created. A black hole, even. They would go back into the world of thrash, and even heavier, darker, and more down-tuned and crunchy than they ever did before. In fact, they went as far as to make the first single of this thing to show off, yes, we understand what real Megadeth is, with Fatal Illusion, a song that's very much in structure and riffing and style to old school Megadeth. That's right, unorthodox song structures, baby. Bass breakdowns, constantly getting faster, more unhinged with a chorus at the end.
Fatal Illusion was about a guy who is just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he gets caught up in the system. His penalty is to be put to death, and since the execution doesn't work, this guy figures what's good for you is good for me, and comes back, and everybody was part of the process. They had revenge exacted on him.
It's a fatal illusion to think that evil never dies.
So they got the extremely underrated at the time Kiko Loureiro from Anger to come in on guitar, which I thought was very weird. No one really seems to know this guy. What's going to go on here? But the guy truly proved himself. All throughout this album, this is the best guitar player they have had since MArty Friedman, because not only is he extremely capable like Chris Broderick, The guy has so many Latin flavor with his guitar playing, and ultimately writes guitar solos that are memorable. They got Chris Adler from Lamb of God, who seems like a weird fit for the band, but he ultimately gave them very much a groove that they had not had in a very long time, because of course he was in a groove metal band, and that could very much be felt in songs like Death From Within and the opening groovy as hell, The Threat Is Real.
A culture made of cover-ups, where leprosy touch their flesh. For backroom meetings and rendezvous, the vultures have come home to nest.
Now, yes, Dave still does the political intrigue, but it's not nearly as cringe and boomery as it used to be. It's way more subtle, and I especially love the way that they do it on my favorite song here, the crushing, heavy, beat you in the head immediately right out the gate line and stage.
Spoke 1,000 times. The perfect words cover the greatest crime.
Hell, this album was so damn good and consistent that even the bonus tracks are all excellent, especially the very underrated Me Hate You. And the songs that they do on this album that are very much trying to be like the Countdown to Extinction style also work in spades. Despite having a bit of a sterile modern production, it kind of fits the tone and theme of this album being about dystopian themes and post-apocalyptic futures. It sold better, did critically better. Hell, it even won a Grammy for the title track and was ultimately the rebirth of the band.
I'm a fighter. I figured, you know what? That cancer is going to die in my body. I'm not going to be the one that's going.
Open up your eyes so you can see all the sick, the dying, and the dead.
Sick, the Dying, the Dead, there were so many problems going into this. Obviously, the title being influenced by the COVID pandemic at the time. And unfortunately, out of nowhere, Dave Mustaine had announced that he was struggling with throat cancer, which would explain why his voice had gotten so deep over the years. And as if things couldn't get any worse, Junior got caught having e-sex in his hotel room with some young fan. And boy, oh boy, do I wish I could never talk about this again, because I constantly think about Junior nutting all over his hairy, fat tummy. And this controversy led Dave Mustaine to fire him. And yeah, look, it's pretty cringy and embarrassing and hurts the image of the band. But, you know, for a guy like Dave Mustaine who constantly goes on about no warning, no second chances with Metallica.
What, no warning, no second chance?
But how much of a hypocrite does that make David Ellefson, too? Both Dave's constantly going about how big of Christians they are. David Ellefson especially is literally a pastor and then cheats on his wife with some young fan. And what kind of hypocrite does that make Dave Mustaine? A lot of people don't like to talk about this, but Dave actually used to cheat on Pam constantly in the early 2000s, which led to them filing divorce several times.
Yeah, and it's a great time to be a Megadeth fan. Oh my goodness. Woo. So anyway.
With Junior gone, they brought in Steve DeGiorgio, famous for playing with several death metal bands and sadists, to do the studio tracks of this, and then brought back James LoMenzo to do the tour and stay with the band going forward. I don't know why they didn't just get James to do the album. They also lost Chris Adler as well, who when he tried to return to Lamb of God, they wouldn't even let him back in the band. So the poor guy is out in the street at this point. But enter Soilworks drummer Dirk Verbeuren. This guy, who's an amazing death metal drummer, known for stuff like blast beats and extremely technical, and probably the best damn drummer they've had since Nick Menza, if not even better than Nick. Maybe the best drummer since frickin' Gar. The limitations of thrash metal, the guy does get to show off on stuff, especially on songs like Life and Hell.
You'll say I'm a disease and I'm addicted to myself. I'm all I need. I'm gonna live and die in hell.
But Dave does get to prove himself with the intensity of songs like Night Stalkers, a super long song that even has Ice-T from Body Count. Not Ice Cube the rapper, Ice-T the crossover thrash vocalist. They actually push the tempo so damn fast. This riff is the absolute fastest Megadeth song of all time.
Retribution to the very last beat of a dead man's pulse. You can hear the thunder roll. You can hear the engines roar.
Celebi Ton is awesome. It sounds like a Motorhead song. And We'll Be Back, the ending track, is awesome, and I honestly think they should have ended their career on this one. The verse even has vocal phrasing, lyrics, and the riff directly ripped off of Good Morning Black Friday.
I'm a soldier's fortune of torture and pain. I dash in your skull until no teeth remain. Bodies convulsed in agony and pain. The face to the features remain. Like all the butchering, I cut them to shreds.
As much as I like this album, though, it's kind of a step down from Dystopia, and it's not one of my favorite Megadeth albums. They do some different things here and there, like The Dogs of Chernobyl has kind of a swing to it. And the song Mission to Mars, although it tries to be different, good God, that song that's fluffing Elon Musk, the dude that's a complete mongoloid moron. The song is embarrassingly bad and one of the worst Megadeth songs ever, along with Sacrifice, just being awful vocals. But if I had to pick a favorite song here, I'm not gonna lie, the one song that everyone seems to bash on, Junkie, which sounds straight off a Countdown to Extinction, to me it's catchy as hell, and I love stuff like this.
Junkie, what you live for? Junkie, you'll gladly die for. Junkie, it's killing you.
They actually did a couple shows, especially at the Budokan, where they reunited with MArty Friedman and did several songs with him, having him once again don the classic Tornado of Souls solo. But this would actually end up being a bad omen, because at the end of the tour, Kiko is facing the choice. Does he want to spend time with his newly formed family, or does he want to spend more time with Megadeth? Because Megadeth was becoming a huge obligation for him, and unfortunately, he chose family. Megadeth will always be more important than your family, Kiko.
A whole bunch of other bands that have said that they were going to retire, and their retirement tour carried on and on. That's not the kind of guy I am. If I say, you know what, my hand's hurting and I don't know how much more of this I can take, and I talk with my management and we all say, you know what, on a good run, if the record is as successful as we hope it is, you know, we're gonna go out on a bang.
Some people are calling this Megadeth's The White Album, but come on guys, there's already a White Album, we don't need another one. But the shocking thing that we all were told going into this album via an AI announcement, which was kind of embarrassing, is that out of nowhere, the man that seemed to never give up his entire life struggling to prove Megadeth in his own case, Dave Mustaine was announcing that Megadeth would be ending with this album and one more tour. And they released the song Tipping Point, and it was a pretty solid first song, you know, it had good guitar tone. And then you have the song that came out, I Don't Care, that a lot of people make fun of. Some people call this the Dr. Seuss song, and it seems like Dave is trying to be too edgy, but I kind of don't mind this song because as goofy as it is, it reminds me of like 90s Megadeth, the stuff like 99 Ways to Die. People have pointed out that Dave Mustaine seems like he's taking shots at David Ellefson.
Creep, jack off in a sheep. You know a rat never learns. You get what you deserve. You gotta know that I just don't care.
Let There Be Shred was the third single, and that song was way better than the other two in my opinion. And a lot of people are like, well, the lyrics are goofy, which seems to be a recurring theme throughout this entire album, is that the lyrics seem to be very lazy. 80s speed metal always had goofy lyrics like this, and Dave Mustaine, man, bless his heart, he is having severe problems with his hand and arthritis that is just making it impossible for him to play.
My hands are very arthritic, the ends of them are very knobby looking.
Allowing for Teemu, the new guitar player, to do tons of heavy lifting, just ripping it all over this album with very memorable guitar solos.
Let there be shred.
You would expect a final Megadeth album to either go out guns blazing or have quite a lot of energy to it, and unfortunately, a lot of the track listing, especially in the middle of the year, is just kind of the same song over and over and over again. Is almost like in the Youthanasia or The World Needs a Hero kind of vein, where they never really hit the gas and they constantly remain in this mid-tempo grind. Dave Mustaine kind of seems like he's out of his wheelhouse trying to be a singer once again. And although I would say personally I think his voice is better because he's not doing that low grumbling thing, his voice seems to be recovering a bit and he's trying to do that nasally, more high-pitched thing he's known for. And no matter how many times I hear this album, a lot of these songs just kind of feel like half-baked filler songs, which is embarrassing for the final Megadeth album. Yeah, this doesn't need to be Rust in Peace to be good. The best Megadeth album to me is Countdown to Extinction, and that's why I feel like Of all these songs, the best one by far is Obey the Call, because it has a good-ass groove to it, and it sounds a lot like something like Angry Again.
We're all reason dies, and the bonds will rise, and empires fall.
And for an album that has Dirk on it, it really just seems like they don't want to show him off or show off at all. And Megadeth was always known for having that intensity, you know? I didn't expect the final Megadeth album to have the intensity of a frickin' Saxon album. The Last Note, the final Megadeth song, which I'm not a huge fan of, like the melodic intro and outro of this thing. It's all somber and poetic, more up-tempo riffing going on. I don't think they ever planned for this to be the last album until maybe like late into the sessions of writing this thing. Of those 10 tracks that are supposed to be the normal songs, it's a solid album. And then they did this embarrassing thing where they wanted to do a cover of Ride the Lightning. And Dave Mustaine has explained that it's not to one-up Metallica, even though he wrote the song or whatever, even though he only wrote parts of it. It's to pay tribute to them and bring everything full circle.
I want to pay tribute to the band that I started in, make mention about what I think about James. I think he's an exceptional guitar player.
Somehow outdo a classic metal track from one of the most highly regarded albums of all time from the 1980s with a perfect reverb-heavy production from the classic era of heavy metal, like a definitive album and song. And what did they do? They did a cover note for note. I've even seen some fans have complete copium overdose. Look, they really outdid Metallica here. They went way faster and all those solos are way better. It's like, it's literally the exact same tempos.
And Dave's vocals are just infinitely worse here. I mean, I understand young James is not exactly the best singer in the world, but even Metallica nowadays can't sound as good as the original.
Time for the guitar solo. Outdo Kirk. All this talk, outdo Kirk. And they don't. It's just the same exact guitar solo note for note, which is the most shocking thing.
Well, I wrote it, so why shouldn't I reuse it?
Not only what is the point of doing this cover, what is the point of putting this on an album? And what is the point of making this the last thing fans hear from you? It's just embarrassing. It seems like a marketing ploy just to sell the album. Labeled as a bonus track, you could technically ignore it. Should we ignore it? Because the album is much better without it. The decisions of what songs to actually include here are abysmal, because you left off the best song, Bloodlust, which feels like one of the best songs, one of the thrash and more speed metal songs off Cryptic Writings, you know, stuff like Disintegrators, and ultimately the riff kind of sounds like Mastermind. It is one of the best songs they've done in ages, and you left it off the album!
They released another song after the fact called Nobody's Hero that's also one of the best tracks on the album. What is this, album DLC? And the most insane thing is these weren't left off because the band felt like they just weren't good enough if they had some extra songs. Dave thinks Bloodlust is one of the best songs on the album.
With that included, and if we were to ignore Ride the Lightning, not even close to Dystopia, but it passes.
It's like making love with a gorilla. You don't stop till the gorilla's done.
The legacy of Megadeth is not sitting in the shadows of Metallica. He went from the bottom to the top to the bottom again how many times? And the guy still is kicking, and I owe Dave Mustaine everything for my metal collection.
If you stop at number 2, you're a quitter. I want to be number 1. It's not that I'm not happy, I'm just not happy not being number 1.
Subscribe to the Downfall Network.
No! Warning, no second chance.